start by thinking about how scientifically informed common sense considers visual perception. So you might think that there's this real physical computer outside my mind, and the real physical computer is giving off photons that interact with my eye in certain ways, sends a signal up my optic nerve to my brain, and then I have this nice visual perception of the YouTube channel or whatever. If that's how the whole thing works, then it's possible to intervene in that causal chain at a later point. So instead of the signal really coming from my eye, it's possible that something else is starting a signal on my optic nerve, and I would never know the difference. And this is precisely what happens in the film The Matrix, right? The people are actually floating in vats of fluid, and there's a computer that is causing all of their perceptions by interacting with their nerves. Well, we can take that a step further, because if those people are just floating in vats and there's a computer causing all of their perceptions, they don't actually need any sentience and they don't need any bodies. And so we can imagine that they were just, in fact, brains in vats, and that there's nothing but the brain that is hooked up to the computer and that's receiving this false input. We may even be able to take this scenario another level farther. There's a debate about whether it's possible for a sufficiently complex computer program to attain consciousness. If that is possible, then you don't even need the brains. It could be that the people themselves are all part of the computer simulation, and there is no body at all. That hypothesis is associated with Nick Bostrom. There's a further step that you might be able to take. In the computer simulation hypothesis, there's still a physical world in which the computer exists. But some philosophers think that it is at least possible, and maybe actual, that minds are not physical. So if minds are non-physical things, then we can imagine that there isn't even a brain. And this was the hypothesis imagined by Descartes, who thought that we should consider this case. Perhaps I am just a disembodied soul floating out there, and perhaps my perceptions are caused by some other disembodied soul, a deceiving demon, who plants in my mind all of these false ideas of a physical world that doesn't exist at all. So on this Cartesian demon hypothesis, there wouldn't even be a physical world of any kind, because you don't need the computer to run, as it were, the simulation. Now, why do philosophers think about these kinds of hypotheses? Well, the most common reason, and the reason starting from Descartes, is that philosophers think of them as skeptical hypotheses that are going to be important for trying to examine our concept of knowledge. We ordinarily think that we know that I have two hands, but I just came up with a sort of list of scenarios that I can't disprove that are scenarios in which I would not have two hands. So this creates a sort of puzzle in the theory of knowledge. But there also have been people who, and are people today, who thought that something kind of like these simulation hypotheses was the actual truth about the world. Thirdly, kind of the place where these things connect most with my own philosophical interests is in the question of what these hypotheses might say about the concept of reality. What would it take for a world to be real? And if it turned out we were in some kind of simulation, would that imply that there is not really a desk in front of me?